Spoken title: Cyber Insights, NIST CSF 2.0 in plain English. The NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0, CSF 2.0, is a plain English playbook for how any organization can manage cyber risk with focus and accountability. It keeps the spirit of the original framework, clear outcomes, not vendor checklists, but modernizes the guidance for today's realities: cloud everywhere, software supply chains, ransomware at scale, and boards asking tougher questions. Version 2.0 also adds a new govern function that makes leadership, strategy, and accountability first-class parts of cybersecurity rather than afterthoughts. If you've ever felt lost in standards, acronyms, and tools, this framework gives you a map you can actually follow. Govern is the headline change in CSF 2.0, and it moves cybersecurity out of the server room and into business leadership. Govern is the leadership and strategy function added in version 2. In plain terms, govern is about who is accountable, what outcomes the organization commits to, and how decisions get made when risks compete with deadlines and budgets. It asks leaders to set a clear risk appetite, name owners for major risks, and make sure cybersecurity shows up in planning, purchasing, and partner decisions. When govern is strong, security stops being a surprise expense and becomes a predictable part of how the organization works. At a practical level, govern starts with an honest description of the mission, the critical services that enable it, and the highest impact risks to those services. That picture should be written down in business language so non-technical leaders can understand it and sign their names to it. From there, the organization aligns policies and standards to those risks instead of copying a generic template. The result is a short set of expectations that people can actually follow and that managers can reinforce without turning into auditors. Govern also means deciding who does what before something goes wrong. That includes naming the executives who accept or reject risk, the teams that approve exceptions, and the people who must be told when incidents escalate. Clear ownership prevents everyone and no one from being in charge, which is where delays and finger-pointing come from. In mature programs, these roles are documented, trained, and reviewed on a schedule, just like financial responsibilities. Another recurring theme in govern is evidence. Leaders should be able to see, on one page, whether the organization is living up to its own commitments. That usually looks like a small set of measures tied to outcomes. Are critical systems inventoried? Are high-severity vulnerabilities remediated on time? Are third-party risks reviewed before contracts are signed? Are incident lessons turned into changes? The point is not to drown in dashboards, but to make decisions faster with enough truth to act confidently. Finally, govern extends beyond the walls of the company. CSF 2.0 explicitly calls out supply chain and external dependencies because outages and breaches often arrive through partners. Governance here means setting entry criteria for vendors, defining what good looks like in contracts, and reserving the right to verify when stakes are high. It also means staying within legal and regulatory obligations and being clear about reporting expectations so that surprises shrink and trust grows. When govern is treated as leadership work, the rest of the framework, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, has a solid place to stand. Identify is the groundwork of CSF 2.0. It answers a deceptively simple question: what do we rely on to do our work? In practice, that means building and maintaining an inventory of business services, data, people, devices, software, cloud resources, and third parties that matter. The goal is not a perfect encyclopedic list. The goal is a living picture of what is critical, where it lives, who owns it, and how failure would hurt. When teams share that picture, they make better choices about controls, budgets, and recovery priorities. A useful identify effort starts from the business in, not the network out. Name the top services customers or internal users count on: a payment portal, patient scheduling, plant operations, payroll, and then trace the dependencies 1 or 2 layers deep. Which applications, databases, identities, and providers keep those services running? Where is the data stored and backed up? Which configurations make it resilient or fragile? Writing this down in short service profiles beats a sprawling spreadsheet because people can read and update it without dreading the task. Data context is a big part of Identify. CSF 2.0 encourages organizations to classify information based on impact if it's disclosed, altered, or unavailable. That can be as simple as 3 levels: public, internal, sensitive, paired with examples and handling rules. The key is consistency. When data has a clear label and an owner, it becomes easier to decide where it may live, which third parties may touch it, and what encryption or access checks are non-negotiable. This clarity also reduces debates later when new tools or integrations are proposed. Risk understanding rounds out identify. Once you know what you rely on, you can estimate how likely specific threats are and how much damage they could cause. You do not need a PhD in statistics to do this well. Plain language scenarios: ransomware locks the file share, a contractor's laptop is stolen, a cloud key is exposed, help teams rank what to fix first. CSF 2.0 emphasizes tying those scenarios to owners and to specific evidence of control, such as a backup restoration test date or a vendor attestation that was actually reviewed. Decisions feel less subjective when anchored to artifacts. Finally, identify extends across the supply chain. Modern services depend on software-as-a-service platforms, managed service providers, open-source components, and logistics partners. CSF 2.0 expects you to recognize those external dependencies and treat them with the same clarity you apply internally. That means tracking who the providers are, what service they deliver, what data they see, what happens if they fail, and how you gain assurance. A short vendor record with contract links, renewal dates, security notes, and exit steps can prevent mild issues from becoming full-blown crises. When Identify is alive and used in daily planning, every later function, protect, detect, respond, recover, becomes simpler and faster. Protect is where plans turn into guardrails people can rely on every day. In CSF 2.0, this includes access control, data security, platform hardening, and human-centered practices that reduce mistakes. The spirit is simple: make the secure way the easy way, and design defenses that fail safely. That starts with identity. Strong authentication, least privilege roles, and timely removal of access keep everyday workflows from turning into open doors. When access reflects real jobs and expires when it should, you cut off many attacks before they start. Data protections matter just as much as identity. Classifying information in Identify pays off here because it tells you what to encrypt at rest and in transit, which collaboration spaces are appropriate, and where data should never land. Good protection looks like routine, not heroics. Automatic encryption, simple key management, and default safe sharing settings. Pair that with resilient backups that are versioned, tested, and logically separated from production systems. The combination ensures that accidents, ransomware, and insider errors do not become business-ending events. Platform and device hardening gives attackers fewer places to hide. Baseline configurations for laptops, servers, mobile devices, and cloud services remove weak defaults and turn off risky features. Patch and update processes keep those baselines current without breaking the work people need to do. In cloud environments, guardrails such as predefined templates, mandatory tagging, and policy enforcement at the account or subscription level help teams move quickly while staying within safe boundaries. The point is to make the right configuration the path of least resistance. Human factors sit at the center of Protect. People will click links, reuse patterns, and hurry under pressure. Rather than blaming, CSF 2.0 encourages building work environments that reduce the chance of harm. Clear prompts and tools, phishing-resistant authentication, password managers that are simple to use, and short, timely reminders inside workflows all add up. When employees can report suspicious messages or lost devices without fear of scolding, you gain thousands of early warning sensors and cut precious minutes off your response time. Finally, protection is not complete without third-party coverage. If a vendor hosts critical data or operates a key service, your protections must travel with that relationship. Contracts should state minimum controls, reporting expectations, and the right to verify. Practical assurance might be a current SOC2, a targeted questionnaire you actually read, or a focused technical check when risk is high. Just as important, know how you would disable access, rotate keys, or switch to a fallback if a partner is compromised. When Protect is built into identities, data, platforms, people, and providers, risk drops and daily work feels smoother, not heavier. Detect is about noticing trouble quickly and confidently so you can act before small issues grow teeth. In CSF 2.0, that means defining what normal looks like for your business services and then instrumenting the places where attackers, errors, or outages will first leave a trace. The aim is not omniscience. The aim is timely, trustworthy signals tied to the services that matter most. When teams agree on what they need to see and where they will see it, false alarms drop and useful alerts rise to the top. A good Detect foundation starts with telemetry you already have but may not be using well. Application logs that record sign-ins, admin actions, and data exports. Identity logs that show privilege changes and multi-factor authentication (MFA) failures. Endpoint logs that capture new processes and persistence attempts. Cloud control plane logs that reveal configuration changes and application programming interface (API) keys in use. Pulling these into one place is helpful, but the real value comes from shaping a handful of high-signal detections tied to business risk. For a payment service, that might be new admin tokens, unusual card export patterns, or firewall rules created outside change windows. Context is what turns noise into signal. CSF 2.0 encourages mapping detections to the assets and owners defined in Identify, so responders instantly know who to call and what to protect first. Enriching alerts with business tags, service name, data sensitivity, recovery tier, lets analysts sort by impact rather than by guesswork. When an alert shows that a privileged account touched a sensitive database from an unusual location, with the service owner's contact and a runbook link right in the ticket, you shave minutes off every response and avoid the "who owns this" scramble. Speed matters, but so does clarity. Teams should tune thresholds and test detections on purpose, using tabletop exercises and safe simulations to see how alerts flow, how long triage takes, and where handoffs stall. This is where you prune rules that never fire, adjust those that cry wolf, and add ones that spot the early stages of your most likely scenarios. Over time, the library of detections should reflect lessons learned from real incidents and near misses, not just a vendor's default catalog. The result is a system that learns with you. Finally, Detect reaches beyond technology into people and partners. Employees who can report suspicious emails or account prompts without friction become a live sensor network. Vendors that commit to notifying you of suspicious activity involving your data extend your visibility outside your boundary. Even small moves, auto-attaching headers to inbound mail, publishing a clear reporting address, agreeing on escalation timelines with providers, raise your detection maturity. When Detect is grounded in risk, context, and practice, it buys you the one resource every response needs: time. Respond is your playbook for when the alarm is real. CSF 2.0 treats response as a coordinated business action, not an IT firefight. The goal is to contain impact quickly, communicate clearly, and make decisions with the right people in the room. That starts with crisp triggers. What events open an incident? What severity levels mean in plain language? And who has authority to isolate systems, rotate credentials, or pause a service? When those calls are pre-decided and written down, teams execute instead of debate, and the first hour is spent reducing harm rather than arguing over wording. Containment works best when it's rehearsed and reversible. Safe defaults, like segmented networks, break glass accounts, and pre-approved blocks, let responders act fast without painting the organization into a corner. Playbooks should favor actions that buy time. Disable a compromised token, quarantine an endpoint, revoke a vendor key, or switch to a read-only mode that stops data changes. Each action should note who logs it, where the evidence lives, and how to roll it back when you confirm the threat is gone. These small, practiced moves prevent emergencies from turning into self-inflicted outages. Communication is part of the response, not an afterthought. CSF 2.0 emphasizes naming audiences, customers, executives, regulators, partners, and setting honest, time-boxed updates. Good messages state what's known, what's unknown, what has been done, and when the next update arrives. Inside the company, responders need a single channel and a clear incident lead to avoid crossed wires. Outside, partners must know how to reach you after hours and what details you require if the issue touches your data. Clear, steady communication preserves trust while the technical work proceeds. Recover begins before the smoke clears. While response limits damage, recovery restores normal service safely and proves it's safe. That means validated backups, clean rebuild paths, and criteria for declaring a system ready patched, scanned, rekeyed, monitored. For critical services, recovery includes temporary alternatives that keep essential functions running even if the perfect fix takes longer. Just as important, CSF 2.0 asks organizations to learn deliberately. Capture a short timeline, the root causes you can act on, and the specific changes you'll make to prevent a repeat. Then track those changes to completion. The cycle closes with improvement. Incidents expose gaps in inventories, access, logging, and handoffs. Near misses reveal fragile assumptions. Mature teams turn those findings into updates to policies, controls, and training, and they verify the updates landed. New runbook published, alert tuned, contract clause added, restore test passed. They also refresh their risk picture. Does this change the top scenarios or the order of investments? When respond and recover are built on preparation, evidence, and practice, the organization does more than survive bad days. It comes back stronger and makes the next bad day less likely. In conclusion, CSF 2.0 gives you a straightforward way to run cybersecurity like part of the business, not a side project. Govern names who is accountable and what outcomes matter. Identify builds a living map of services, data, and dependencies so choices are grounded in reality. Protect turns that map into everyday guardrails that make the safe path the easy path. Detect focuses attention on the few signals that buy time when something goes wrong. Respond and recover turn practice into action, contain harm, restore safely, and fold lessons back into how you work. You don't need a blank check budget to start, only clear ownership, short-written expectations, and evidence that the basics are done on purpose and on schedule. If you adopt CSF 2.0 as your shared language with leadership, partners, and teams, you'll find it becomes easier to say what's at risk, show what's working, and invest where it counts. That clarity is what builds trust inside the company and with the people who rely on you.